Welcome to Shawnee Town 1929, an outdoor living history museum where we focus on what life was like in a small farm town in the 1920s. Hi, I'm Shannon Hsu, Curator of Collections at Shawnee Town 1929, and I'm here to talk about the automobile in 1920s Shawnee and how we interpret its influence at our museum. To begin, let's step back in time to Shawnee in the late 1920s. The population of the city proper was around 560, with many more people living on small farms in the surrounding township. The town was oriented to a town square with a public park in the middle. The town was also filled with a mix of businesses and private homes. The people that lived in town were pretty up to date. They had electricity and running water and access to a streetcar that went all the way downtown. Most of them owned automobiles too. The streets were, quote, paved with crushed rock and oil and were maintained regularly. Parking was permitted on all streets and sidewalks ran down the major thoroughfares. Shawnee also had streetlights installed in 1929, and the newspaper proclaimed that there were, quote, no more dark corners. To help with orientation, the public park is where City Hall is today. Main Street is Johnson Drive, and 5th Street is Neiman. This was the center of 1929 Shawnee. By looking at this map, we can see several things related to automobiles. Circled in blue, you can see the location of the O.W. Fisher Chevrolet dealership and service garage. Circled in turquoise, you can see the location of the OK Garage, where they offered auto repair, tires, and gasoline. And circled in green, you can see the location of the Murphy service station. Replicas of the O.W. Fisher Chevrolet dealership and the Murphy service station can be found at the museum. Here's where things start to get more interesting. Circled in red are all of the gas pumps that were available to people passing through Shawnee. They had several choices. There was a pump at Garrett's grocery store, 2 at the feed store, a few at the OK Garage, and several at Murphy's. They all likely sold different brands of gas and oil. All of these purple circles are garages. Some are on property with homes, others on property with businesses. I think this is an interesting visual to show how the automobile affected the physical look and makeup of Shawnee. It shows how quickly and completely the automobile was adopted. It demonstrates in a real way why we need to interpret automobiles and auto-related businesses. This is just an 8-block section of town with 23 individual garages. The automobile was everywhere. This is O.W. Fisher Chevrolet. This photo is from the 1940s, but it is the best photo we have of what the building looked like when it was built in the 1920s. These early dealerships had a franchise for a specific trade area, displayed and sold company vehicles, displayed new vehicle models, handled financing, made repairs, and stocked spare parts. If this sounds familiar, it's because we still follow this model today. O.W. Fisher passed away in 1943 at the age of 52. His son Chauncey continued to operate the dealership until 1961. He closed the business when General Motors changed their franchise structure that same year. Now that you know a basic history of Shawnee in the 1920s and the growing relevance of the automobile for our community, let's take a sneak peek into our newest building, the O.W. Fisher dealership. I'll hand it over to the director of Shawnee Town 1929, Charlie Poller.
Thanks, Shannon. Hello, everybody. The staff and chickens here at Shawnee Town sure do miss all of you. We hope you're staying safe, and we are looking forward to seeing you again soon. In our dealership, we are going to highlight for you our 1927 Nash sedan. Some of you might have seen this car before, as it used to live in the garage next to our historic Hart DeCaney farmhouse. We have a wonderful volunteer, car expert and mechanic, and longtime Shawnee resident, Vince Garrett, who will take us on a tour of the car and answer some questions for us. Let's go.
I forgot to turn the switch on, so it cranked over, didn't start. Cranked over, didn't start. And then I thought, oh, I gotta turn it on. So I turned the switch on and it started just right now, which is for a carburetor going on cold and not even getting, just anything more than a rough tune. That's pretty amazing.
But that's also the beauty of these cars. Pretty much if they have gasoline and a spark, they're gonna run.
Cars were simpler. It was just such a simple time, in the world. And so when I get to working on these, I feel that way. But so many people come up while you're working on it or while you're driving them around, and it takes them back. And it's those memories that make car people, I call myself a car guy, I'm not a collector, I'm a caretaker. And I love sharing that with people because it makes them have a aha or a fun moment, you know, out of our crazy world. And the cars have always done it. People always have, if you ask anybody, they'll have that one car that they really love or that they remember as their favorite, and that's the way these are.
Can you explain the basic principles of a late 1920s engine?
Well, they're a flathead, which means the valve is in the block. It's a real simple motor. If you just sliced off the front cylinder, it would be the same thing as a lawnmower. They're not a high compression. They turn over very easy. The timing is real simple on them. Everything is right up front, easy to work on. The carburetor is a updraft, same thing, almost like a lawnmower engine carburetor, slightly bigger.
Is it different than a modern carburetor?
It's, much different. The modern carburetor is going to be sitting up on top of the manifold and be a downdraft. This is an updraft, kind of like everything was back in the Model T and in the 20s era. This is a 6-cylinder, which is kind of nice because it's a big car. See, a lot of the sedans, they stop right here at this door jamb. But this one is big. There's a lot of space between the back seat and the front seat. So that's why I think they had a 6-cylinder in this. This is a pretty heavy car.
So how many people would have comfortably traveled in this car in the 20s?
Comfortably would have been 5,
7, maybe 8 were crowded in there because there would have been a lot of children. But yeah, for a family, 4 or 5 people very comfortably.
A lot of times they would have the trunk, and it was a trunk. That's how they got the name of it. They'd have the trunk right about where the spare is now. But if you looked at the old movies like Grapes of Wrath, they would have stuff wrapped up, strapped down on the front bumper, stuff down here on these fenders, laying across the top. You couldn't put too much on the top because the bows were made out of wood, but they would put some things. But in the back, there'd be almost like a steamer chest. It'd be about 1.5 feet wide, and it would be leather straps on it, and it would be on the back, which was an option back then.
So Vince, can you tell us a little bit about fuel back then? What grades of gasoline would there have been?
It would have been a low grade. It would have been lead, which is what was used to lubricate the internal parts of the motor along with the oil in the crankcase. Okay. And that's when the standards came out to change that. They had to figure out a way to remove the lead because it was, dangerous, but yet still, lubricate the upper part of the chamber. But that's also, funny you ask that, that's also the battle with the carburetors. The older carburetors were not happy with the new gas. The new gas kind of ate up the insides of them.
You said new gas being unleaded?
The new gas, the unleaded gas, it would eat up the internal parts of these kits, carburetors, accelerator pumps, stuff like that. And so then they figured out they had to make the kits happy, even though it was an old carburetor, they had to make it happy for the new gas, the unleaded gas. I remember growing up on the farm, you could have an old tractor or an old truck or a car sit for a year or two, get in it and start it, and it'd fire right up. That gas stayed good because of that lead. The new gas has about a 30-day tank life, and it'll kind of lose its get up and go. So that's the other thing that's different with these cars.
So by pumping that gas,
Moves it into the vacuum pump, and then the vacuum pump trickles it down into the sediment bowl, which then goes into the carburetor. Sediment bowls were the early fuel filter.
tell you what, not having any black smoke blowing out of there, that is so good. This car just keeps on giving me so many surprises. These back windows slide up and down, I believe, with a little handle, and then the others crank like a regular car. And then the front windshield is kind of nice. It'll tilt out to give you some fresh air coming in. That's always fun. That's a big time. But yeah, that motor is so quiet. That's a good sign. I don't think it has a filter on it, which was very common. All they did was just change the oil fairly often. Yeah. Oil was cheap back then. These were easy to change. Usually you did it out in the driveway, so you keep the dust down from people driving in and out of your driveway at the farm. This is old-fashioned bodywork.
Just kind of hand hammered.
Hammered it out, get it back in shape to where it was close, call it good. Maybe take a little barn paint, drag across it.
Look for Fisher Chevrolet and the Murphy Filling Station to be open to the public later this summer. We are actively working to collect items for these buildings, and if you have artifacts, photographs, or stories about car dealerships and filling stations in the 1920s, please let us know. We'd love to meet with you about them. For the most up-to-date information about tours and programs, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, or check out our website at www.shawneetown.org. Thank you, and we hope to see you soon.